All right, you curiouser and curiouser Herle Burly-ites. Another special live podcast for you today. My interview with the Honourable Wab Kinew, Premier of Manitoba. It was recorded on October 23rd with the Empire Club of Canada. And it felt really good, at least for a week, to trade in the Zoom room for a big fancy ballroom at the Weston Harbour Castle, with lots of engaged Canadians in attendance and ready access to rum and coke. Premier Kinew doesn't need much of an introduction from me. He's the 25th Premier of Manitoba, leading the NDP to a majority government in 2023, becoming the province's first First Nations Premier. First elected as an MLA for Fort Rouge in 2016, he holds a BA in Economics from the University of Manitoba and a master's degree in Indigenous Governance. From the Onigaming First Nation in northwestern Ontario, he's a best-selling author, former broadcaster, devoted dad, and husband. Premier Kinew joined me to talk a little bit more about his background and why he got into politics, his agenda for Manitoba, charter rights and the Notwithstanding Clause, nation building and the Churchill Project, trade, tariffs, and the state of our broader relationship with the U.S. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it. As a boy growing up in the shadows of the grain elevators of Prelate, Saskatchewan, I didn't foresee myself demystifying the details of AI. But 60 plus years on, here we are. This is on behalf of our presenting sponsor, TELUS, who, you conscientious Herle Burly-ites will know, just opened their new sovereign AI factory in Rimouski. Let's start here. What exactly is a sovereign AI factory, and how does it differ from a traditional AI data center? Think of it as the difference between owning your own house with a really cool kitchen you can create in versus just renting a prefab storage container to hold all your stuff. An AI data center only provides the infrastructure, like servers and storage, but an AI factory is a complete AI development ecosystem, or state-of-the-art AI kitchen, to stay with that metaphor, which means it's got the storage you need, but it also has all the cutting-edge technology, so you can create new AI models from scratch or customize existing ones to meet highly specific needs, and then deploy them in your business operations, all on a single platform. A complete processing service, in other words, and a unique opportunity for Canadian business to be AI creators right here at home, rather than just piggybacking on another nation's prefabricated AI models and renting space in their servers, which may make it subject to their laws, even when the data center is located here. With TELUS's factory, they own the servers, operate the infrastructure to meet their clients' needs, control all the routing through their pure fiber channels, and manage the whole process under Canadian jurisdiction. Sovereignty by design. It's baked right in. Next week, I promise you more AI demystifying from TELUS and blessedly fewer kitchen metaphors from Herle. Premier, it's a super thrill to be talking with you. I think you're easily one of the most exciting politicians in the country. You've raised partisanship, so I'll tell you, you're definitely the only New Democrat, the federal liberal sphere in this country, so I'm glad you're staying out of it.
Oh, you went right into it, eh?
That's
great. All right.
But you know, one of the things that makes you such an exciting figure to me, and it flows a little bit from your introduction about your father, which is I grew up in Saskatchewan in the 70s and the 80s. There were no Indigenous people in positions of leadership in politics, in business, in academia, in anything. And it seemed the most unlikely thing back in those days that an Indigenous person would ever be the premier of a province in Canada, much less a prairie province. What's the evolution that's happened that allowed your existence right now?
Well, Mom and Dad, they're pretty great.
Yeah.
But Manitoba's great too.
You don't take the existence thing too
Yeah,
quickly.
no, I won't get into the birds and the bees. But, no, Manitoba's a great place, and this is what I said on election night, which is, you know, look, little old Manitoba did something more progressive than what a lot of the big cities across this country have never done, right? And I think that's a testament to the fact that the reality is always more interesting and more complicated when you're up close and you're in the midst of it. And so, like, you know, I was there too. I was the only Indigenous kid in the classroom in the 80s growing up.
Right.
A lot of times in Manitoba, and you know, At the same time, our province has evolved and we've had the ups and downs. We had some very tough moments like the landfill controversy that I was talking about in my speech. But we placed a calculated bet politically on the nature of Manitobans to see through that and to focus on the bread and butter issues of healthcare and the economy. And I think, yeah, it's a testament to where we are in Canada today, that if we zoom out from the prairies to the rest of the country, that, you know, there is an opportunity to engage on substance, and there is an opportunity to engage in unity. And I think, especially coming out of COVID, which started with us banging on pots and pans for each other and ended with us yelling at each other, people want unity. People want something positive. People want something more hopeful than just the same old attack ads and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I once had the opportunity to talk to David Axelrod about Barack Obama and being the first black president, and the constraints that were around Obama, perhaps not to give full voice to all the things he thought, to definitely not be the black president of the United States, but to be the president of the United States who happened to be black. Do you feel any special pressure on yourself in this capacity?
Well, I'm not black. I'm an Anishinaabe, so I have a lot of respect for Mr. Obama. No, I'm picking on you. I'm sorry.
And you're doing it well.
No, I mean, like he made it possible for somebody like me. Like, it didn't even occur to me before I saw him in the States, right? And I followed him through the nomination. I had a chance to meet him very briefly right before he secured the nomination. And effectively, after a lifetime of hearing, like, you can't do it, or negative messages about Indigenous people, I had kind of internalized a glass ceiling in my head. And then I saw this guy who was, like, clearly going to become the president, clearly the most talented politician in the race. And I just thought to myself, oh, I'm telling myself a lie. You know, somebody from a community like mine, somebody who's had to overcome his own share of whatever, is going to become the most powerful person in the world. And so it didn't immediately follow like, hey, and then I'm going to be the premier. Yeah. But it's just like he made something possible in the minds of a lot of people my age. And the best part is, like, for my kids, that's the first president that they remember. You know, like, that is their baseline.
Yeah.
It's a completely different worldview than those of us older, right? And so I think that's what happens in our politics when we open things up and we're more inclusive, is that we just create a new baseline in this country. And so, yeah, like, we're here, like, yeah, we're really excited about the future of Canada and the opportunities that we have. But, you know, in Manitoba, people shrug. Like, the kids are like, yep, that's what a premier could look like for sure. And that's cool. Right. I think that's great for the future of our country. Yeah.
But you don't feel that you need to comport yourself in a certain way to be acceptable to the broad public?
I mean, you could talk to my political staff and they will tell you, like, what it's like to try and wrangle me. So, like, I might feel a certain, you know, whatever, but once the day starts, I just kind of, you know, do my thing, you know, as it were. But I think what I would say to respond to, like, what you're really getting at here is, I think almost by definition, somebody who is going to get into an executive leadership government role like I have has to have the bigger view of being a leader for everybody. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. You know, you're not going to have the perspective that would earn the support of enough people to have a majority in government unless you were looking out for everybody, unless you did have that view of one province, one country that I'm advocating for. So yeah, I think that you know, I'm a very staunch practitioner of our traditional culture. I dance at powwows for fun. I think about our language all the time. But at work, I'm trying to fix healthcare. I'm trying to make the economy more affordable. And along the way, if I can bring some kids into the Premier's office and let them sit in the big chair and take a selfie, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of pressure from Indigenous people in Manitoba for you to be more focused on their issues.
What I would say is, like, I think sometimes people think that there's going to be like a silver bullet or like a cheat code, you know, because I grew up in the community, and then like, oh yeah, I bet the consultation's just like super easy, and Section 35 just like breezes right past you, you know, because you came from a reserve. And no, not at all. Like the relationships and all of that, it takes as much time as I think anyone else does. And I think maybe the one thing that has been a bit different is we have decided in Manitoba that we're going to take a different approach to the mega project thing, which is instead of trying to legislate our way through, we're trying to get our consultation ducks in a row before we go out with things. So I think maybe taking that perspective is informed by coming from the community. But honestly, if you've spent any time in a corporate boardroom or in Canada over the past 20, 30 years, you will know that this is a way to get things done anyways. So even there, I don't think it's necessarily unique to the community. I think most people who've succeeded in building big projects in this country have engaged with Indigenous communities the way that we're talking about doing it as a provincial government looking to build some mega projects.
Cool. Yeah. Let's pick up on your speech.
Sure.
I'm pretty interested in it because I was a charter junkie. Big fan of the Pierre Trudeau vision. It's made me a political nerd when I was in university, but so I followed all that pretty closely. And, you know, I mean, Manitoba is deeply responsible for this because there were other premiers that were in support of Section 33 of the Notwithstanding Clause, but nobody was as insistent on it as a guy named Sterling Lyon, who was the Conservative Premier of Manitoba, who I think was really afraid that the courts would do precisely what they've been doing in terms of interpreting the Charter. But Ellen Blakeney was also was also in favor of Section 33, and he thought it might restrict government's ability to, it might restrict labor's ability to collectively organize, or it might restrict government's ability to expropriate land for public purposes. So they were worried about it from that perspective. The idea that you've come up with about the sort of the political check on it is kind of diametrically opposed to the whole idea of a charter, because the notion is that when rights are being suppressed, often that is the view of the majority. Often the government's doing that because it's a popular thing to do. And so you need this non-political bulwark against that.
I think it comes down to putting more pressure on progressive politicians such as myself to go out and win the argument. That's effectively why I chose the landfill story. That was a winning wedge strategy. They had us on the ropes with that strategy. We knew healthcare and the economy were number one, and then they found this wedge issue that was going to make everyone forget about healthcare and the economy, and it almost worked. But we put a bet on the good nature of Manitobans, and we said, you know what, if we talk to people like mature adults, and we just say, you know what, we don't agree on everything, but we can still do the big things like fixing healthcare and the economy together, we're going to trust that Manitobans will choose the clear glass of water instead of the dirty glass of water. And they did. And so to answer your question, I think that is the role that I'm arguing here, is that we have, well, in Canada, the legislative and executive branch are bundled together, and then we have the judicial branch, and these things are going to effectively act as a balance. The legislative, executive side can pass a law, but then the judge could rule, say, you know what, this would otherwise violate somebody's human rights. And then it's up to you, the voter, and importantly, for that to work, you're going to have the person going out there with the wedge and say, here's why we're passing this law, and try to work everybody up into a frenzy against the vulnerable minority. And then it's up to somebody like me. It's up to the progressive opponent to that government to come out and say, that's wrong. They're violating human rights. That's not who we are as Canadians. That's not who we are as people from this province. And instead, here's the vision that we should rally around. And it helps if you got your own wedge too, but no, just kidding.
So we talk a lot on this pod nowadays about the pitiless world we all suddenly inhabit, and how the federal government no longer has the luxury of respecting or indulging, or however you want to put it, all the various competing rights and interests and entitlements out there in its struggle to keep our economy moving and Canadians working. One huge issue is labor stoppages. Most people don't know it, but after the costly BC port strike 2 years ago, the Minister of Labour investigated a new system of dispute settlement. An expert advisory group proposed a neutral third party that would step in before a strike or lockout, delaying any stoppage. If the two sides are not able to resolve their dispute in 60 days, the neutral party could recommend an agreement, but the public could be spared a punishing shutdown our economy can hardly afford. Our sponsor, CN, decided to do some serious polling on the subject. It hired Polera, which earlier this month surveyed 2,712 adult Canadians in 7 regions from coast to coast. The poll was done by phone. A sample like that carries a margin of error of 1.9%, 19 times out of 20. Bottom line, strong majorities of those surveyed view rail and air transportation and marine ports as essential to the Canadian economy. To that end, 72% of those surveyed supported the neutral third-party dispute settlement system. In fact, more than 80% of Liberal voters surveyed supported it. So did more than 70% of unionized workers surveyed. That's pretty solid support. Such a system, in other words, is widely seen as fair. Something else. About half of all the respondents, and they included Liberals, Conservatives, and New Democrats, said they see unions as a positive force in Canada and want their right to collective bargaining protected. But they also want balance. They want to see everyone work together.
The people who accepted the notwithstanding clause back in '82, as opposed to the advocates of it, the people who accepted it certainly thought that it would be used very rarely. Because they thought there would be a public shaming. They thought there'd be a public sanction to it. And indeed, Canada's charter is unique in the sense that it has something called Section 1 in it, which, like the American Bill of Rights does not have, which says that you can actually suppress a right in the charter if such a act can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So anytime anybody uses Section 33, they're saying, I'm doing something that cannot be justified in a free and democratic society. I would have thought there would be massive public sanction against that, but there has never been any time that it's used. So how do you think we need to talk about this differently to people to get them to see this side of it?
Well, I think it is about making the argument on human rights. I think one of the failings, unfortunately, of progressives, and I think I'm counting both of our political movements on the progressive side when I say this, is we typically, when there's a hot button wedge political issue, we're scared of it and we run away from it. You know, and I think the bet that we made in the election was like, no, we're just going to grab the bull by the horns, and you know, some things are worth losing elections over, and at the same time, we're just going to double down on healthcare and the economy. And I think the same would hold true. Like right now, the notwithstanding clause has been used a lot in Quebec to work on wedge issues, which are, I would argue, playing on the idea of laïcité and secularism. But are a veiled way to blow a dog whistle. And they've been used in the West against trans people because people know, and we saw this in our election too, people want to be able to campaign against LGBT, but they know they can't say that in public. So they say trans, and they know that people will fill in the blanks and take the argument to LGBT in private conversation on the doorstep or otherwise. And so I think us as progressives or people who want to have religious freedom, people who want to have equality in our society, we just have to go out and engage with it and say, no, that's wrong. That's against human rights. And you know what? Yeah. And hey, again, the political advice is going to tell you to do the opposite. I think you saw a pretty clear example of this in 2015. Harper tried to do the wedge on the barbaric cultural practices hotline. Trudeau did the smart thing and he didn't take the bait and he won the election. But I voted for Tom Mulcair, and I wasn't a partisan at the time, in part because he called it out. And so I think maybe there is a path that the progressive can call out what is targeting a vulnerable minority and still win the still make the winning election argument to the general public. At least I hope so. It raises the stakes, certainly, but I think it's possible.
It's kind of a tangent, but it feels to me, particularly watching what's happening in the States, that people are so much more interested in getting the outcome that they want than caring about any of the processes that led to it. That a lot of us who believed in institutions and thought that there were rules that needed to be followed are finding that the public doesn't really care about any of that. And politicians who want to break those walls down can just do it.
Literally breaking walls down.
Yeah, my God.
I saw in the news yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's true. But I think there are some institutions which are worth having the fight for. And there are some institutions worth putting your re-election or putting your election on the line, or even just on a more micro level, whether or not you won the day in the media. It's worth putting that on the line to have the argument over some of these issues. And I think human rights are one of those things. And I think equality in our society is one of those things. Other times, maybe we are just arguing about some procedural thing that we've inherited from England 400 years ago, and yeah, it's whatever. But the idea that, somebody should be free to be who they are in our society, that we should respect the rights of religious people as we respect the rights of the secular and, the atheist and the agnostic. I think these are important things where we should step up and have the fight. Cool. Or at least, as I say, have the debate.
All right, let's talk about Manitoba a little bit to this bunch of Central Canadian well-heeled canapé eaters.
I cut my Chinese EV joke out of the top of my speech because I didn't want to lose the room immediately.
Well, you can bring it out now. What's your agenda? And what's your governing agenda in Manitoba right now?
Well, healthcare takes up a huge amount of our time. It is.
You making progress?
We are making progress. We've hired 3,400 frontline healthcare staff, which is the first step to being able to do other things. We've opened a few emergency rooms that were closed by the previous government. So those are tangible steps. We've opened up a bunch of clinics. And basically, we're 1/10 the size of Ontario, so just 10x whatever number I say, and then you'd have an idea, right? So imagine Ontario, 34,000 new frontline healthcare staff in 2 years, right? That's what we did in Manitoba. So we're making progress, but we got a heck of a lot more work to do. And then on the economy, right? Like, the job numbers are still holding in Manitoba, and inflation has stayed in the target range, which it was high when we came into office. We cut the gas tax and we brought inflation down to the Bank of Canada target range. So again, no mission accomplished sign when it comes to the cost of living for the average person, but we've been able to maybe not see the worst case scenario that everybody was worried about earlier this year. We've been able to and part of it's just because we have this great diversified economy in Manitoba, right? We're never too low, never too high kind of thing. So yeah, things have been going pretty good in spite of all the unexpected things that have happened this year.
Well, sticking with healthcare for a second.
Yeah.
What's, in your view, is there any, and what is the role for the private sector in delivering healthcare in Manitoba?
Well, I'm a big fan of this private sector healthcare company called the Lisa Monkman Medical Corporation. And it's because I'm married to my wife, Dr. Lisa Monkman. So obviously there's a role, right? This is sort of the bargain that Tommy Douglas and everybody came up with in your province, which is that there is going to be a role for private corporations. And I think everyone accepts that, right? Like a private practice for a family physician, everybody accepts that. On the flip side, like a fully private healthcare system with unfettered, big pharma influence, I think would make people uncomfortable in this country. So there's probably a balance that needs to be struck. And for us, it's the Canada Health Act. If something's permitted under the Canada Health Act, okay, we're open to it, we'll engage, and let's find a way to improve health outcomes for people within the Canada Health Act.
In your view, do private, private MRI clinics or private eye clinics, a lot of these things are springing up in large numbers around the country now. My home province of Saskatchewan has a lot of this. Does that gut the public system, or does that relieve the public system?
I think it depends how it's done. And again, I think it has to come back to the Canada Health Act, which would say single payer, right? Which, the government has to be the person paying for the test, whether it happens in a public clinic, public hospital, private clinic, etc.
Right.
So those are basically the ground rules. I think the other thing that people tend to do in health, as in every industry, is to try and look for the silver bullet. And so it's like, yeah, if we just buy an MRI machine, boom, the problem solved. But actually, no, it's the staffing. And that's why everything we say in health, it always starts with the staffing numbers that we've added, because anything else you want to do, you have to have the people to run the machine and to book you into the appointment and to analyze the test. So there's a lot of techno-optimism around AI, but I don't think that that's going to change overnight. And we are going to continue to need to have these frontline healthcare heroes working on our behalf. So again, for us, a lot of the health improvements are about getting the people on board, improving the workplace, improving the culture, setting up systems that allow people to have meaning and to flourish as fully formed individuals within this very complicated healthcare system, and to also address the needs of a changing society, which is aging, but also has complex and unique needs. Like in our province, MS is much more prevalent than it is in other parts of Canada. If we came here to Southern Ontario, we went to Lower Mainland
Is that an
BC.
Indigenous thing, or it can't
No.
be a Manitoba thing?
It's no, it's actually other communities.
Oh, really? Because I thought MS was a particular problem in the Indigenous community.
Indigenous communities have major issues with type 2 diabetes and the related issues. So again, those are other unique regional needs. Same thing, go to other parts of the country, there'll be unique issues there. And, we just got to find ways to tailor the delivery of healthcare to meet the needs of people where they're at.
The following is a political advertisement. To build a strong Canadian economy, we need a Made in Canada plan. Public service workers power our economy. They support small businesses and keep our supply chain moving. Canada's economic resilience relies on having strong public services. To strengthen our economy, we need to invest in public services. Learn how at forucanada.ca. This message was paid for by the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
On the economy, you talked about Manitoba's relatively good economy, never too low, never too high. It's kind of low, right? It's an equalization receiving province most years. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we used to call those have-not provinces.
Still do.
Is there any prospect of that changing?
Yeah, I think if we kind of have three mega projects on the horizon. One that we're almost certainly going to do, a second that we're trying to put the financing piece together, and then the third, which has been very public, is the Port of Churchill. And if we build the three of those out to the full extent, then yeah, I think Manitoba can become a have province, and not like 40 years in the future. I mean, like within the next 5-10 years kind of thing. And yeah, so I think that that's a big priority for me, because the economic horse pulls the social cart, right? This is one of the lines that I repeated time and time again, up until and including election night. And yeah, healthcare is number one. We love healthcare, we love education. I'm an NDP premier, so I'm surrounded by all these people who have great ideas on social issues and social programs. And what I've tried to build into our culture from day one is, great, how are we going to pay for it? Right? So we need a growing economy, we need more jobs, we need more economic activity in order to pay for the really amazing things that we want to do in government. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we take this current economy in Manitoba that's heavily geared towards ag, and that's why the tariffs from China are such a big deal for us. Mining, manufacturing, finance, insurance, transportation, and then layer a huge step up in the energy sector, a huge step up in the tech sector on top of that framework. And right now, as most people in the room will probably know, any tech play at a large scale is basically an energy play. And so we have a lot of low carbon electricity in Manitoba, and I think that's going to be one of our competitive advantages, is to try and use that to unlock part of this potential.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Churchill for sure. What are the other two?
The other two are not really public yet.
Oh, okay.
We're working them up. Yeah. But they're energy projects, basically.
Well, let's get into Churchill, because, again, I have a little bit of history. I used to work with the Canadian Wheat Board, and they were users of Churchill and believed in the Port of Churchill. And it has emerged as a potential national major project. And yet, when I talk to people at the conferences I go to or around here, people say the following things to me about it. They say, there's no rail line there, and there's no port infrastructure there, and the water's frozen most of the time, and what are we going to ship through there and to whom anyway? So are there good answers to those questions?
Yeah, but the first thing you got to know is that the people who are saying criticism A, B, C, D are also advocating for a different mega project with the federal government right now. So how we have Oppo amongst the parties, we also have Oppo with the mega projects. I'm trying to get that federal.
You got a war room on mega
now.
projects?
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, we can poke holes in every other province's mega projects too, which I won't do. Yeah, on a more serious level, yeah, for sure. There is a rail line. We'd like to upgrade it. There is a port there.
But it would need to be upgraded.
Yeah, in order to hit the sort of level of investment. And basically what we're doing as a province, Chris Avery from the Arctic Gateway Group is here tonight, and so they're the port operator. We're working with them. We're working closely with the Major Projects Office that the federal government has established, is to just build out that next generation of investment. Right now, we and the feds are each investing on a given year about $30 million each. We invest in the port, the feds invest in the rail line. That's just kind of how we've done the division of powers. And basically, before we go from a $30 million annual investment to a potentially a $30 billion investment, we just want to get all the due diligence and all the details tied up. But basically, the fundamental argument for Churchill is this: Western Canadian resources power a huge chunk of the Canadian economy. The closest way to get Western Canadian resources to Europe is through Churchill. Dramatically closer due to the curvature of the earth. So again, if we can, make this play around critical minerals and energy and doubling our export markets, non-US export. Yeah, exactly, right? The EU is going to play a part in that, and Churchill will allow us to get goods there more quickly. And there's ways to solve the various challenges that you've laid out. We have something like 16 icebreakers on order as a country. We only want like 1 or 2, keep the shipping lane open all year. And yeah, we're already investing. There's another economic...
How much is just nature keeping it open right now?
So right now it's about 4 months a year. By the end of the century, so this is going to be the longer term argument for Churchill that I make here. By the end of the century, the sea lane will be open because of climate change year round, right? Global warming. So you fast forward 70 years from now or whatever, this port is going to be used by Canada. This is going to be a major infrastructure focus. The question is, do we want to just get caught off guard when that opportunity emerges, or do we have an opportunity and a responsibility right now to build up the infrastructure so that we're ready to take full advantage when that sea lane is open year round? But basically, yeah, you fast forward 70 years in the future, we're going to be launching rockets from Churchill. There's going to be compute all over the region. There's going to be a ton of solar and wind and other energy infrastructure. And the argument that I'm making is, let's put the first level of large-scale investment down now so that we're ready to capitalize on that future opportunity.
Right. And for some reason, there seems to be no objection to there being a pipeline. Some provinces have political debates over this. You wouldn't have a political debate over a pipeline?
We definitely would have a political debate. There's a rally of 300 people outside my constituency office because I said we should consider whether we want to have a pipe as part of the Churchill play. So it's definitely a live issue. But the reality is, I think this moment in Canada where we just, when was the last time Trump talked about 51st state? Like a couple weeks ago when Carney was there? Right? You have the American president talking about whether we're going to exist as a sovereign country or not. I think we have a responsibility in the name of our country's future existence to examine every opportunity to grow the economy. And like I said in the speech, it needs to be consistent with our values. Being strong on the environment, it's one of our Canadian values, I would say. And not necessarily like climate activists. I just mean people who like to go to Bass Pro Shops and drive boats and be outdoors. That's part of who we are as Canadians. And I think that, we should just engage in the conversation and look at it and see if it makes sense from a business perspective and from an environmental perspective at the same time.
So that whole Team Canada mentality feels a little bit more fragile now than it did 6 months or 8 months ago. And I'm not blaming you for that. Don't get me wrong, but it just feels like the sense of we're all in this together is a little weakened, and some of it comes down to there are real trade-offs. So you and Scott Moe are dealing with canola producers who have been hit by tariffs from China because we are protecting the potential for an auto industry, which is not likely to occur now. In central Canada, what are your hopes and expectations for how that goes down?
Well, I think it's important for us to understand that we are currently right now paying the price for Ontario's auto industry, right? Like that's not a hypothetical. That is a real situation for people in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And Alberta, the effect is less pronounced because of the oil industry, but there's still an impact on farmers there. So, like, in effect, we are subsidizing the auto sector through the lost economic opportunity and the opportunity cost for canola producers and pork producers. And that's just a reality. And there has never been engagement. There's never been a conversation with us about, like, is this the right course of action for our country? And you know what? I want to support the auto sector in Ontario. You know, I want to make sure that there's good manufacturing jobs in Quebec. But also, I think it's necessary for us to engage on a path to lifting these tariffs that are hitting our ag industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry in a province that you just, again, reminded us is a have-not province right now. And so just to kind of quantify it, we've got one vertically integrated pork producer who was in our office a few weeks ago, and it's $19 million a year on an annualized basis, the Chinese pork tariff, right? And so that's a real quantifiable impact that businesses are facing in our part of the country right now. So
Pork,
to me,
big industry in Manitoba. People may not know that.
yeah, and a ton of it goes to
Both processed
China.
and farmed.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And we send a lot to the States as well, too. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the sector. But yeah, the point that I'm making is, we are all for Team Canada. And we are doing our part as Team Canada right now. And what we're saying is we would also like the industries that are important in our part of Canada to be part of the equation when we're engaging in DC, when we're engaging in China. So Carney's going to meet President Xi. Apparently, he's trying to, so that's good. But at the end of the day, like, why did we put these tariffs on in the first place? Whether it was American or Chinese counter tariffs, it was to create leverage so we could have a negotiated path forward, right? Okay. Let's see that negotiated path forward. That is effectively the argument that I'm making. I'm not trying to say put canola before the American or the Ontario auto worker. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we are currently experiencing impacts and we need to work together on a path forward here.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you know that Canada is a global leader in the production of medical isotopes? Canadian isotopes are life-saving tools used around the world every day to diagnose and treat cancers, sterilize medical equipment, and advance medical research. For decades, Canadian nuclear innovation has powered breakthroughs across healthcare, industry, and research. And today, through the Isotopes for Hope campaign, the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council is working to double our isotope production by 2030. Why? Because the world is counting on Canada. Medical isotopes are a promise that patients will get faster, more accurate diagnoses. A promise that hospitals will have the tools they need to precisely treat cancer and other diseases. And a promise that Canada will continue to lead in the development of nuclear technologies that benefit people here at home and around the world. From our CANDU power reactor fleet to our accelerator network, from research labs to hospitals, Canadians are driving innovation that brings hope and saves lives. By supporting Isotopes for Hope, we're not only securing Canada's leadership in the global isotope market, but we're also helping build a healthier future for everyone. The world is counting on us, but we can only rise to this challenge if we work together. It will take all of us, industry, the healthcare sector, governments, and the scientific community, all aligned to maximize the potential of Canadian-made isotopes and ensure that we continue to bring hope to patients when they need it most. Learn more at www.canadianisotopes.ca. So the Prime Minister has received criticism from some quarters from not being elbows up the way he promised to be elbows up, and for not being tough enough with the Americans, and not retaliating, and not doing going into the Oval Office and sucking up to Trump and not coming away with anything. And
have you made these criticisms? You just had those like right there, ready to go. Like
they're right there. They're right there because I hear them all. I hear them all the time. I don't know if you know who my partner is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Liberals were elected to stand up to Trump. Full stop.
And they should be, and the government should be doing what?
Standing up to Trump.
What would that look like?
Well, I think we need to have some bravado, have a little pushback. Let's, show them we're in the, before I was a partisan, I covered the 2011 provincial election and the Manitoba PCs. I was there in their campaign headquarters on election night. They had tried to run a positive campaign when the NDP of the day ran a very negative, Oppo-heavy campaign. And I asked one of the former cabinet ministers what happened. And he said, you know what, when you're in the ring with your opponent, you got to get your elbows up. You got to let them know that you're in the game. And I kind of think that logic applies, which is like, yes, you need to schmooze, but what does Trump do? He schmoozes in person, and he's very kind of like perceptive of whatever emotional stuff is going on around him. And then you leave, and then he like calls you names, and he goes crazy on Truth Social, like immediately afterwards. And I'm not saying we need our leaders to be like, oh, we're going to go to social media after this, but we do need to have strength. We do need to show that we're serious about sticking up for ourselves as a country. And not for nothing, a lot of Canadians, for a good chunk of this year, have been not buying American booze, have been not traveling to the U.S., and I think are in the process willing to say, like, you know what? To me, national pride is more important than a bad economic deal that we may or may not be running for. So again, I want to play a constructive role in Team Canada. I fully expect to continue to work with the other premiers and the Prime Minister, but I will always be a voice pushing for us to be stronger against Donald Trump than what we're seeing right now.
Okay. I want to just play off that a little bit, and I'm not really asking this in your capacity as a premier. Just asking this in the capacity as a person and what you've told us that you care about, right? How do you feel when you look at the United States right now? Like, it's taking me to a dark place, which is why I ask you, because you've got a smile on your face.
So, gonna give me in trouble to say this. There are some things that America's doing right at this current moment, right? And a lot of the stuff that they're doing in AI, I think, is good. But the way that they're going about it, and the fact that it's providing cover for things like ICE and a lot of the other nasty stuff, I think is wrong. So again, it's a tough situation. They're always going to be our closest neighbor. They're always going to be our biggest trading partner. And Canadians are always going to have a bone to pick with Americans, right? Like this did not start with Donald Trump. We always had this thing of like, oh, America, you know what I mean? Like as like a sibling does, or as like a really close friend does, where you always like hit your limit or your fill of something. And so, yeah, the same is true of the States right now. I just hope that the Democrats can put up somebody who can earn the support of the electorate. I just think that they've done a bad job of choosing their candidates recently. And so, yeah, hopefully they pick somebody who's got game.
Right.
Then they can rebuild the republic.
So, like, you're way more sanguine about this than I am. Like, you're assuming that there's a 2028 election that's free and fair and normal, and that Trump doesn't run in it. And
well, I got good staff who keep me grounded, right? I was debating going to the inauguration. I didn't go, but I was debating going, and I was like, why not? I was trying to get all worked up, like how you're saying you do. I was like, why not? This might be the last orderly transfer of power in the republic. And then my staffer was listening, was like, save it for your memoirs. So you got to kind of like keep it steady, right? You can't get too high, can't get too low.
Right.
Okay, I can't let you go without asking you about politics. You
Finally, we'll talk politics.
you win elections, right?
Sometimes.
We've just been through, between COVID and the aftermath of COVID and then the election of Trump, some massive debates about the nature of our country, right? And about how we want to be and about how we want to comport ourselves, all kinds of things. And the federal NDP, in my view, were almost completely irrelevant to those discussions in the country, and then in the election got essentially wiped out. What are the federal NDP doing wrong? What advice would you have for them to become part of the Canadian conversation again?
Well, I think that what we've tried to focus on Manitoba-wise is just making a difference for the average person out there, you know, and I think that it might look different today than it did a generation ago, but I don't know if it does. We just spent the summer in like a lost cause rural riding, and we came within 70 votes of winning it, right? One of the safest conservative seats in our province, and it was basically a toss-up. Somebody's little league game went into extra innings, and that was that's what determined the outcome of election day. And it was interesting. Like, we're the government, but we were the change candidate showing up in small town Manitoba. They're like, "Yep, no, I'm not happy with how it is. We need a change. We always vote PC. We're going to vote for you now." You know, is what people were saying, which is crazy to be the government and to be the change candidate. But it was an interesting read to have on the voting public there. So I just think, like, what I took out of that was this crazy idea that if you show up and talk to people, they will give you a chance. And I think that's what the federal NDP needs to do. Is, we get it. Like, the cause du jour is important for everybody, but like, come to Transcona, where people have been working on the rail yards for generations, and explain it to this family who's struggling to make ends meet, how you're going to help them. Come to the reserve, where I spend more time on a reserve than anybody. And what I used to tell Trudeau when we'd argue about the carbon tax, I used to say, I've never seen an electric vehicle on a reserve. You know what I mean? He had no comeback, right? And he's a good guy. Like, we get along, whatever, you know. But you know what? I saw my first electric vehicle on a reserve 2 weeks ago.
Who's got a Tesla on reserve?
No, it's not. It's the medical van in St. Teresa Point, Manitoba. It is an EV, and they like load up all the patients, drive them around. So anyway, change is coming. But show up in that community and explain how you're going to make life better to them. Go to the suburbs where elections are decided and explain what you're talking about, how it's relevant to them, and it's going to make things.
And does ideology make sense in that context? Do you talk ideology to them? Do you talk class conflict with them?
Well, to me, like, the ideology is making a difference for the average person.
Right.
Yeah. Like, so some people have different ideas of what the NDP is, and I'd love to hear, and trust me, it's very different in Ontario what people think the NDP is compared to Manitoba or Saskatchewan or Alberta or BC. Like, when I was chosen as leader in 2017, I'd give my victory speech there. I walk off stage. There's a guy from Swan River, Manitoba, 5 hours northwest of Winnipeg, grabs my hand and bare paw. "Wab, every NDP leader in this province since Ed Schreier has gone on to become premier, that's what we expect from you." And he throws my hand down.
Yeah.
That is the expectation. We're not here to make a point. We're not here to have a consolation prize. We're here to win government. That is the expectation of the NDP in Western Canada, right? At the provincial level, at the very least. And so, again, what is the NDP about? To me, the NDP is the party that made a difference for people that I knew. Who helped my dad when he was not allowed to leave the reserve without a pass? Stephen Lewis. Who helped my mother-in-law, who was smart but living in poverty, get her education paid for? She goes on to become a teacher, a principal, raises her daughter. Her daughter becomes a medical doctor, and now the family will never be in poverty again. Who did that? Howard Pauley.
It's one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. I heard you give that tell that story at a speech in Toronto
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. It's a compelling story.
Well, it's Howard Pauley, NDP government, that did it. And again, the fundamental thing that I think of when I think of the NDP in Western Canada or Northwestern Ontario or where we're from, the NDP is like these folks that you're talking about reaching, they have the will, they have the smarts, they just need a little help getting started. And it's been NDP governments that help the people that I know get started, or NDP politicians. And to me, that's the ideology, is helping people. Person could be, and hey, I've got no problem helping somebody who makes 200 grand a year, for the record. When we cut the gas tax in Manitoba, many progressive heads exploded. How could you do this? You know, it helps the rich. You know what? They're struggling too. In terms of somebody with a $200,000 salary, they're struggling with the cost of living. I'm here to help everybody. I'm going to help the kid on the reserve. I'm going to help the person in a small rural community. I'm going to help this family that's living in maybe a more elevated living condition. And this is, to me, what the NDP is all about. It's a party that should be about bringing people together. And yeah, I don't think that finding ways to categorize people into different hierarchies or different groups is the right way to bring people together. I think you should focus on a message that unites, and that's what I would encourage folks in the federal NDP to focus on.
Excellent. Speaking of a party that brings people together, you're hosting the Grey Cup this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really hope the Blue Bombers are going to be one of the.
Well, I really hope they're not, but I'm likely to be there regardless, so I hope you'll give me a hot spot or something when we run into each other.
Yeah,
It'll be
no,
damn
but
cold.
hopefully you're sitting in the stands like you did once upon a time. Sorel boots, skidoo suit on,
Suit.
big garbage mitts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the prairies are all about.
Anyway.
CFL games.
All you Herle Burly-ites, we'll see you at the Grey Cup in Winnipeg in November. Premier Kinew, thank you so much for this. Great conversation.